U.S. relations, there are growing calls for the better regulation of artificial intelligence after South African-born billionaire and businessman Elon Musk, the chatbot, it's called Grok, it started spreading misinformation unprompted about a so-called white genocide that's happening in South Africa. One professor is cautioning that South African lawmakers do not fully grasp the dangers of AI when crafting regulations. Let's speak more about this with Newzroom Afrika's Qaanitah. And Qaanitah, you've actually even written a piece about this, and I think your opening line is most appropriate for us to kick off this conversation for people to understand what actually happened. You say on your article posted on News 24, South Africa just experienced an unprecedented attack on its sovereignty, and I don't think we've fully grasped the enormity of it. What happened?
Well, we know that last week, XAI, which is owned by Elon Musk, their chatbot called Grok malfunctioned. And what we saw was that any prompt, whether it was, do I look nice in this selfie, or should I choose this Croc shoe, the AI chatbot responded with unrelated information about a so-called white genocide in South Africa. And when prompted as to why this was happening, the AI responded to say that it was prompted by its founders to focus on a white genocide. The company XAI then responded because it showed two very serious things. One, the possible hallucinations of AI, which a lot of professors have been warning about and talking about. And second, the consequence of AI in trying to spread misinformation. Yeah. And it was found that this was a consequence of human intervention. Now, you and I can sit here and guess whether this is an extension of the obsession of one Elon Musk, who happens to be one of the founders of XAI, and obsession with this narrative that there was a white genocide that's happening in South Africa, when no facts back that claim up, and there is no semblance of reality in that accusation. Yet now we are faced with a situation where we are leaning towards a technopolar world, where the power does not reside with nation states. The power resides with multi-billion-dollar big tech companies, a handful of them, who now, as experts have warned, have basically embedded themselves within politics in the United States and have become untouchable in any way. And so the real question now, Koli, is, was this an extension of manipulating AI, which has, up until now, big tech has insisted its neutrality for a political purpose? And if so, the dangers are profound, not only for South Africa, but for all countries around the world.
Well, I know that you spoke to one professor. Let's actually prompt that soundbite, and then we'll continue the conversation in a moment.
Regulators also do not have as much of a technical understanding of what is actually going on and how then this can actually impact the lives of ordinary citizens in those countries, and we need to do more. In South Africa, this has in some ways shown itself also what happens just before elections, because then there's a question about all these different online systems and how they handle, whether it's misinformation or electoral rules and all those parts. And we need to have, as South Africa or any country in the first place, say, we are a democracy, we have these rules or foundations that we put as how we engage with each other as citizens in whichever way, and if these get broken, there must be consequences. And enforcing that, that's where the problem comes in, because if you have these huge multinationals that are not based in the country, but people are using their services, then something has to give.
Qaanitah, for people who may possibly not understand what we are talking about here, let's try and bring it to a real-life situation in South Africa.
Yeah.
Bell Pottinger, during the era of state capture, there was misinformation there.
Yes.
Guptas and those that they were in bed with, basically claiming that they're being attacked. And then you try and use July 2021, the unrest, again, misinformation leading to real-life consequences. Am I drawing parallels here that are completely unrelated?
No, absolutely. It shows the progression of technology. What Bell Pottinger did was revolutionary at that time, 10 years ago. But seems to be a walk in the park in comparison to the capabilities of generative AI. And so the warnings from experts is that this kind of entry-level misinformation that we've seen around election times through bots, etc., will seem nothing when a mega tech company can literally redefine what you see to completely change your political narratives. And essentially, there's an example of this in Myanmar where they claims that a genocide happened because of misinformation. Yeah. So this is the first real-life example of the intersection of political power, misinformation, and big tech. And so South Africa was probably the first clear-cut victim of it. And the reality of it here is that there are multiple consequences. The first is a security consequence, right? Yeah. And so are our security services, educated enough, prepared enough for what something like this can mean and what it means for the sovereignty of the state? The second of it is the human consequence for misinformation. Yeah. There are people who believe that there's a white genocide going on because that's all they see. And if something is repeated enough, it becomes reality. And then the third is that the consequences of it, the geopolitical consequences, is what we're living in, what Ziyanda was talking about, is South Africa going to pay a geopolitical price or diplomatic price for something that's actually not even happening? And so we cannot overstate the importance of this moment and how South African lawmakers and members of parliament need to sit and not be hysterical about the response, but need to take advice from experts and see how regions like the EU have battled for a very long time to get regulation in place. And still there too, they are suffering with an amplification of misinformation. Again, there's human real-life consequences. If people died in July 2021 when there was no generative AI as easily available as is in 2025, one is, terrified to think what the consequences would be in this scenario.
Qaanitah Hunter, thank you very much indeed. Trying to make sense of the digital world and sometimes the ugly consequences that can come with it.